One Piece TCG Banlist update for August 12th is finally here. For those of us in North America, we're just kind of fully waking up, getting a hold of everything. Some of y'all have stayed up, but some of us have work as well. So catching this in the morning here, want to make sure we get to know the changes that are coming our way, especially starting September 1st, 2024. The following cards will be added to the list of banned cards that cannot be included in any deck. Now, there's a couple of surprises here. Trafalgar Law, the leader, is banned, but actually as an update, it's been errata'd, it's been changed. So similar to what's going on with Sakazuki in 05, we had that leader banned, but errata'd. That way you could still have kind of a replacement leader for that. If you kind of identified or really love Sakazuki, then you could play Sakazuki still, albeit at a worse form. And this Trafalgar Law is definitely, as we're going to discuss in a second, the errata is strictly worse. The other banned card kind of came out of nowhere based on people's kind of interpretation of what is to change, and that is Enies Lobby. And I'm not sure if this really hurts anything but the Lucci decks, and so this is an interesting ban. Now, it seems like the most popular opinion was to restrict or ban Moria, and then after that maybe Rebecca, and that would hopefully kind of hurt the black decks enough. But there was a lot of decks that would seem to, you know, kind of stand to lose from that. Lucci would be a big one. Black White Luffy would pretty much become unplayable because it would lose its consistency piece. So I think because of a lot of things like that, they made the decision to instead go for Enies Lobby. Now, I don't think they really needed to touch this, but again, maybe Lucci just became the best deck. I have my bias of being a Nami player, and Trafalgar Law going is a-okay. Now, this opens up the floor for a lot of leaders, a lot of cards to become playable again, and so we're going to kind of walk through that, my initial impressions of what this means for the OP08 metagame. And as far as I'm aware, this has no effect on 07. So us 07 Law players, I should say us, I'm not playing Law in 07, us 07 players in general that are playing Law will be able to continue to do so unrestricted in terms of the errata that's coming up. So please, you know, do what you need to do to take over your tournaments, but it may not be the investment in the deck that you want, albeit it may be a better investment now because people might be trying to sell their cards en masse, trying to get out of the deck. So this could be a good situation for a couple of spike players to take advantage of a couple of tournaments, maybe some locals, before this card gets errata'd. So I imagine a lot of staples in this deck are getting like they're really kind of dropping in price right now, and especially over the next couple of days. So it could be a good opportunity for that. So hopping into this kind of next section here, let's talk about the errata itself. Specifically, this is the original. Let me just blow up my camera a bit here. This is the original kind of text on the card here. Actually, I can bring myself down a little bit. So the original text, you know, once per turn, Dawn -3, place up to one of your opponent's characters with 3,000 or less to the bottom of its owner's deck, and play up to one character with cost of 4 or less from your hand. So you have Dawn -3 to return your opponent's character with 3 or less, which is why you play cards like Gordon to do a lot of power reduction, and then you would play up to one of your characters with 4 or less. So it was kind of two-pronged. You would reduce your opponent's field size, and then you would kind of grow yours for free. And so this kind of really put a pinch on a lot of the kind of slower decks, decks that like to build up their board and then kind of go in, or heck, it even put a pinch on a lot of the 4 life leaders because they didn't have the time to build their boards up. So naturally, being one color and having 5 life was really powerful against Law, or just gave you that extra edge, that extra life that you needed. But now this opens up a lot more space because the new errata'd version, oh lord, if I could just get to the next screen here, is this. So Trafalgar Law, activate May once per turn, Dawn -3, send one of your 3,000 or higher characters. So this is interesting. This is 3,000 power or higher to the bottom of the deck. So you don't necessarily need a reduction anymore. You can't send your searchers to the bottom, but you can send your pretty much your other characters. You can just keep cycling through your characters. So, you know, this doesn't mean that there's no Reiju ban here. There's no Shachi and Penguin ban here. So you could just theoretically kind of keep going through cards here, and play up to 1 4-cost or lower Heart Pirates type card from your hand. Now, notably, this is strictly worse because it doesn't control your opponent's board, but this also means Maria is still played in Law, right? It could still be played in Law as a way to kind of power things out here. So there still is a lot of synergy there Although I will say that now this is kind of cycling through your own cards. It kind of allows you to cycle through bigger cards and kind of replace them. So if you had any immediate enter the battlefield Magic player immediate on play effects that you wanted to take advantage of over and over again, then you can do so by playing out a card, getting an immediate effect, and then replacing that and keeping going. So you're not getting rid of your Gordons, your Makinos, or anything like that, but your more powerful stuff you can cycle through. So I'm curious. This is definitely strictly worse, but it also again does not restrict Moria. It does not restrict anything in that sense. So maybe Law is still playable, just to a different angle. It's definitely going to be a lot worse. It's not going to control your opponent's board at all in that sense. So we're definitely going to see a change in the field in terms of what's playable. Now, Enies Lobby being hit, as I mentioned, is really interesting. Activate main, you may rest the stage if your leader's type is CP. Give up to one of your opponent's characters -2 cost during this turn. I don't know. I think... I don't know if this really should have been hit. Like this again really only hits the Rob Lucci decks, right? Like I guess like after this hit, like you could be playing Ice Age, maybe, but then like with something like this, you know, give one of your opponent's characters -2 cost. The triggers, you play this card. I mean, I guess at this point, like you play Ice Age if you wanted the cost reduction, because this isn't restricted to, you know, like obviously. Like this isn't restricted to any leader. The Enies Lobby was, and that was a repeatable effect. That was the key, right? So this is technically strictly worse, although the trigger is, you know, kind of a little bit better, right? Because you can cost reduce certain things, and then you know you KO one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 3 or less. It still has value, especially against the aggro decks. I guess this is the replacement for it. If Lucci still wants to kind of compete at the high echelons of play, I guess this is the replacement, but. Even still, I don't know. I don't know about this one. So regardless, Enies Lobby, a very surprise ban. We don't have a Rebecca ban. We don't have a Gecko Moria ban as many people predicted, which kind of means that Gecko Moria, in my opinion, is definitely going to see a big uptick in play. This was the kind of de facto second place black deck right now, and Gecko Moria can still kind of do a lot. It can really flood the board out super quick. It has a more combo oriented kind of play style, kind of flooding out the board, but especially now with Law gone, I think like especially at the upper end of things, like it can really have some staying power. And if Lucci is going to take a hit, I think a lot of Lucci players will still continue to try and play the deck. They will probably try Ice Ages or other effects to try and replace the stage, but the Lucci decks tend to be a bit more control oriented. So we could see a big shift in what's actually playable in terms of that. So that means Moria can enter the space and take that spot, especially with 8 cost Moria being super playable in a deck like this. It may not be the deck that takes advantage of it the most, but it's still a black deck that plays Gecko Moria because Moria is the leader. So it's definitely going to be a big winner in terms of playability from there, which, you know, as a Nami player, I do have a little bit of fear about. Now, in terms of big winners, I wanted to kind of touch on this as well. Monkey D Luffy, they didn't really gain anything, but the whole idea was that if Moria was banned, this deck would essentially become unplayable. This deck is very like 50-50, hit or miss, like, you know, high, low, lows. And for those of you that were kind of watching yesterday, the Pasadena regional, where Nami ended up winning, you could see in kind of multiple games that there are situations where if the Luffy player misses and all they're seeing, especially against Nami, they're seeing the wrong half of their deck, where they're not seeing their rush aces, but they're seeing their sabos. The matchup isn't going to work out for them, right? And that's why Nami ultimately ended up taking it, because yeah, the Nami player that was playing piloting Nami was very high skill, but also if the black-white Luffy player is going to brick, it's going to brick. So the Moria is still around. Black-white Luffy is definitely, you know, still going to increase in popularity. Very popular, again, high, low, lows type of deck. And it's a fun one. It's a fun one. There's a lot of options that you get, but this deck is probably going to lose some points, especially with the recent Goldie Roger that was spoiled, which makes it so this deck essentially cannot stay behind Sabo anymore. And that this deck is also kind of on the outs almost, with the fact that Blackbeard is coming around, and Blackbeard kind of shuts off like some key pieces in this deck. In my opinion, there are some activate main effects, but it shuts off some key pieces. So, but Monkey D Luffy definitely, it's taking the axe in 09. Not going to be playable in any way, shape, or form with the unless it gets some brand new pieces that it can replace. But I I really doubt it. This is definitely more so one that's meant for like right now, not exactly future proof unless something changes in O10. Or is it O10 or will it just be OP10? Because it's OP09 for single digits. Anyway, Reiju is definitely a big winner here because the de facto purple deck in the metagame was RP Law. And so with Reiju kind of just now taking up the big roost in terms of purple decks, we're going to see a lot more aggro come from this. Maria is going to be definitely used in this in 08, especially with once Return of Dawn is returned to your deck, you draw a card. So that's going to be a big thing with Maria. If you don't have any Dawn minus effects, Maria can be a great way to ramp back up, but also when you return cards, draw cards. So that's going to be a great way to take advantage of all those Dawn minus effects kind of putting you behind. Reiju is going to be a big winner, especially with when like this deck played out its bigger characters. A deck like RP Law would really kind of hold it down. Lucci can really hold it down in some ways with the minus effects, kind of returning some of its bigger stuff, and then you'd be kind of down on Dawn, down on characters. So now Reiju's definitely going to see some ticks up, which is, you know, as a Nami player, I like to see blue decks win, but also that means more puddings coming my way. So I think with that, the big winner that everyone is talking about right now, in my opinion, is Nami. Now, with Nami recently taking first place in 2 big regionals, it's clear that OPO7 is the big coming of Nami, right? Nami is officially a tier 1 deck, in my opinion, in OPO7. It is a top contender. A lot more Nami mirrors are about to come, especially in the ranked sim, in the public sim, and so people are already making adjustments like playing hangers main and everything as a way to break the mirror and as a cheap 1k counter that could be searchable by Apis. And so the Nami mirror right now, especially in OPO7, I have to admit, as a Nami player, it's brain dead. It's not a fun mirror at all. This mirror was a lot more fun when Zeph was in the deck, because then you actually had mind games to kind of force swings, and you didn't have blockers like Margaret. So the deck was more interesting when Zeph was around, the ability to kind of bounce out your Kayas and all that stuff. But now it's a lot more brain dead. It's really who's playing more Apises and kind of who finds their hanger first and stuff like that. Even the hanger could be a great bait too, because the hanger you have to tap to kind of play it out, and so you could play it out, tap it, and then all of a sudden hold up like white snakes. You could hold up some amount of like mellows, and you could even hold up gavels. Gavels don't protect the hanger itself. It doesn't buff the hanger. It could buff lead, but it does mill 2 cards. So that's a great way, if you see kind of a giant hand of yourself, to kind of mill a bunch of cards. Although I will say, even if it's hanger, one of the better Nami counters that you might have for the mirror is honestly probably just pudding. That's one thing to very much consider, especially in the version of Nami that exists right now. A lot of cards just kind of 1-for-1 replace themselves. You play a Margaret, you draw a card, you play a Gloriosa, you most times kind of grab a card you don't really whiff, and then you start playing Pilafs, and your Kayas are generally reducing your hand size, but you usually have a large hand size, so a late game pudding can really end the game, kind of outdoing the power of like 2, 3, heck, like maybe 4 Pilafs at the end of the day. So pudding could be seen as the big Nami counter in the mirror, but also it could probably be seen as kind of the big Nami counter kind of for other blue decks as well. Margaret, I do want to kind of specifically point out, especially with the loss of RP Law and his lobby being pitched down, Margaret is just going to be an insane blocker. There's very few cards now that exist in the metagame that are being played that can actually deal with a card like this efficiently or kind of regularly, I should say. And Margaret is just going to be a great blocker. This is going to be a card that most of the time now, and based on what we're seeing, is going to get a block off. Maybe against yellow, where the yellow strategy right now, especially with NL, is to starve the Nami player, where you don't swing, you just kind of play out character, and then just start swinging big boards. Against that type of matchup where Gidatsus are going to be removing stuff like this, then maybe not so much. But again, it just feels like Margaret just gained a lot of points in terms of playability in terms of that. And I do want to again highlight pudding again, just because with Nami's popularity rising up, a lot of the blue decks like the Dofi decks, a lot of blue decks like Reiju, all this stuff, like they're going to be trying to draw until they have pudding to counter the Nami decks, and maybe that creates another type of adjustment for the Nami player. Like there could be, you know, now I'm feeling like you don't want to be playing actually for a Gloriosa in certain ways. Like I know that's something that Adam was playing yesterday, Adam C, for the Pasadena regional. as a way to kind of push cards back up to the top with all your searchers that are, you know, things getting bottom decked. But especially with pudding, I think you do want to be playing more Apis to get rid of cards in your hand, keep your hand size low, make sure the pudding doesn't have as much value, to make sure you're kind of still churning through your deck, finding your Kayas, finding your Pilafs, whatever you need, as a way to kind of make that work. So I think, again, 4 Apis could be probably the mainstay. If Nami's going to be a tier 1 deck, and if you want to fight the mirror, it could be playing a 1 of Hanger and playing 4 pudding, or sorry, not 4 pudding, 4 Apis to counter puddings coming your way. So just something to note as Nami players, as we see kind of a big rise in the mirror and also the blue matchups. But that is kind of the situation with the August 12th ban list update. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Trafalgar Law got nuked. Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you kind of surprised with the Enies Lobby ban? And were you hoping to see something else get touched as well, out of black, out of any other color? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. We are about to come up to an interesting meta in 08 here in the West. We're kind of like in the middle of 07 right now, and a lot of crazy cards coming out of 09 as well.